Hey, ho, ho, ho. What's up, Toilet Water Squad? I'm Big P, and I'm streaming out some Rum Chocol-Tof for the Noggy, which is a very strained pun, I guess, on a Limp Bizkit song. I'm not sure anybody is going to get that without me saying that, but it is a spiked eggnog ice cream with chocolate honeycomb toffee and orange zest mixed in. I'm starting off by making the honeycomb toffee. I'm using a recipe by Chef John from foodwishes.com. All of the ingredient amounts are going to be in the description, but that's 120 grams of granulated sugar, 44 grams of light corn syrup, 20 grams of honey, and 30 grams of water. You want to stir that into like a sludge and then put it over like a high, or not high, medium to medium high heat. And stir it until it turns more liquidy, and then once that happens, stop stirring it. I'm weighing out my baking soda here before I do that, so that it's ready for when this mixture gets to 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 149 degrees Celsius, at which point we'll take it off the heat and add the baking soda carefully. I'm assuming you have a scale if you're planning to make the ice cream part of this video, but if you're just planning to make the toffee part, I have the like the cups and tablespoons and stuff of everything in the description, because this is from Chef John. So you could also find it on his video. The only thing that I added is that I added 3/4 of a cup of chocolate chips to put on at the end. I made this toffee recipe previously for like a banana ripple ice cream as a mix-in for that. So when I did that, I just measured all of the amounts in grams as I did it, so that in the future, like right now, I wouldn't have to dirty, measuring cups and, measure other measurement things. I could just pour everything into the pot. I did forget to measure the chocolate chips that first time, so that's why that's in a measuring cup this time. I assumed that I used about 3/4 of a cup last time, so that's what I started with this time, and that ended up being pretty much right. And that was 140 grams of chocolate chips. I showed earlier that I had the knob on my stove around 7 or 8 o'clock. Every stove's different, but for mine, that it wasn't getting it hotter. The temperature was kind of stalling, so I turned it up to around 5 o'clock. Also, I don't think I mentioned this yet. You want to be really careful with this, because this is going to be really hot and it's going to burn you and it's going to stick to you and it's going to keep on burning you while it's stuck to you. So be really careful with it, especially when you add the baking soda, because it'll bubble up. It shouldn't bubble up too much though, but make sure you have a big enough, high enough walls on your pot or your saucepan or whatever. So I'm just making sure I have everything, in the right place, so that, I can do this quickly and not have to worry about something, getting something, or I don't know. But yeah, you want a parchment lined paper on top of a sheet tray that you can pour this on right away. You can see that right when I pour this into the mixture, the baking soda into the mixture, it doesn't really bubble up. It just doesn't bubble up until I start stirring it. You want to do this part pretty fast, because you don't want the honeycomb effect to deflate and, ruin the honeycomb effect. I have this sped up a little bit, but I think that I did it maybe a little too slow, because I didn't get as much of a honeycomb effect as I did last time I made this. I also kind of did a bad job pouring this out. When you do pour it out, you want to spread it out, but also you want to spread it out as you're pouring it. You don't want to touch it once it's been poured, because that will also deflate it and ruin the honeycomb effect. So once it's there, if it's all in a big lump, I think you should probably just leave it as is and let it cool that way. And you want to let it cool for at least a half an hour. The first time I made this, I just chopped up the chocolate chips, and I just sprinkled them on top of this after letting this cool for about 10 minutes, so that it was still warm but it wouldn't deflate it. So I did that. I sprinkled the chocolate chips on top, and then after letting them sit for, I don't know, like another 10 minutes, I came back and very lightly used that spatula to spread the chocolate chips out, because at that point the heat had kind of made them a little melty, so they were easy to lightly spread out. But when I do it this time, I'm melting the chocolate chips ahead of time instead of cutting them up. I'm melting them over a double boiler and then pouring them on top. So I let this mixture cool for a bit while I do that. You can do whichever method for the chocolate chips, they both worked. Or you could just not use the chocolate chips, because after all, you are the John Coffee of your chocolate honeycomb toffee. So I feel like an insane person describing what a double boiler is in every single video, but different people see this, I guess. So basically you just boil a tiny bit of water and then put a heat safe bowl over top of it, and the steam from the water lightly warms the bowl so that it lightly melts the chocolate. You don't want the water to be boiling, you just want it to be lightly steaming it. And if you want to be more careful about tempering your chocolate so that it doesn't like smear, Jesus Christ, smear, you can cut up a small amount of chocolate chips and then stir it in when it's at about this point. Tempering chocolate is just controlling the temperature of the chocolate so that it teaches the cocoa butter crystals how to form in the right way. If you don't temper the chocolate will be streaky and it'll be softer at room temperature. But since I'm freezing this, I don't really care that much about it. I could be wrong, but I don't really think it matters since I'm freezing it. If you do want to temper the chocolate, take out about an eighth of the chocolate chips ahead of time and then cut them up and then add them towards the end so that it cools down the mixture. Also, maybe watch a video about tempering chocolate because it seems to be harder than I'm probably making it seem to be. I've watched a bunch of, YouTube chefs try to do it and not succeed, so I don't know. So once the chocolate was pretty much melted, I like to take it off when there's still like a little bit of small chunks in there, just because I feel like maybe that kind of will temper the chocolate. I take it off the heat, stir it a little bit more till those melt, and then I dry off the bottom of the bowl with a towel so that I'm not dripping water onto the toffee as I pour the chocolate onto the toffee. And then you pour the chocolate onto the toffee. You want to try and get an even layer across the whole top of it, and then you want to let it cool till the chocolate hardens. It's a good idea to put it in the fridge or the freezer or something for like a half hour. But I did not have any room in mine, so I just left it out on the counter, and it did not really harden enough by the time I cut it. So it was still pretty soft, but that's fine. I was fine getting chocolate throughout it. To like kind of protect the toffee from melting in the ice cream. But also, it could also be that I just didn't temper the chocolate and that's why it was so soft. All right, now here comes la creme. Oh boy. Somehow I've never made an ice cream with egg yolks. I started off by just making like Philadelphia style ice cream, which is just no egg yolks and no stabilizers. It's just, cream and sugar and I guess whatever flavoring. And then from there, I just went to using stabilizers. Or if I'm just using stabilizers, is that still Philadelphia ice cream? Is Philadelphia ice cream just not egg yolks? I don't know. So I'm getting 70 grams of egg yolks, which turned out to be from about 5 eggs for me. One of them broke, so I think it was a little less than 5 eggs, but still. And I'm gonna add a little bit of stabilizers to this anyway. I'm gonna use about half of what I usually use. If you don't want to do that, maybe add an extra egg yolk. Maybe add a 6 egg yolk, or however many it takes to get to 70, and then one from there. And if you want to use xanthan gum instead of the stabilizers that I use, you can try between 0.5 grams and 0.75 grams. Now that I have those measured out, I'm putting them aside to mix the dry ingredients because the stabilizers need to mix with other dry ingredients before getting them wet, or they will clump, and you don't want that. So we're going in with 130 grams of white granulated sugar. I like to start with the sugar because, there's a lot of it, so you can just put all the other ingredients on top, and I feel like you're able to mix everything together more. Like I don't want to put the stabilizers in first and then maybe them gets, I don't know, stuck down there. This doesn't need to be said, or like I don't know if this means anything is what I'm saying. All right, so now I'm going in with the stabilizers. That's, I'm using half of what I usually do. So 0.1 grams of Lambda Carrageenan, 0.2 grams of Guar gum, and 0.4 grams of Locust bean gum. Locust bean gum. I feel like I said it weird. Locust bean gum. Then I put in 7 grams of skim milk powder. And then I put in some eggnog type spices. You can skip these if you don't have any. Like, you don't have to go out and buy any of these. Skipping them won't change too much of the makeup of the ice cream, so it should be fine. It'll only really affect the flavor, and different people season their eggnog differently, so it doesn't really matter if you don't want to use those. So all of these ingredients are ground, so just add the word ground after everything I'm about to say. You can also just grind your own, like use like fresh ground versions of these. But 0.1 grams of cardamom, 0.15 grams of cloves, and 1 gram of nutmeg. Then I added 2 grams of salt, and that's all the dry ingredients, so you can stir that all up now before you add the wet ingredients. I started with the eggs that we measured out earlier, just so that I could break them up before adding other ingredients so they wouldn't get lost under like the milk or anything, I guess I could have also just broken them up in the bowl that I had them in, but I didn't do that. Then I added 50 grams of light corn syrup and 3 grams of Blackstrap Molasses. And then I added 405 grams of whole milk, and that's the last of the wet ingredients that we're going to be adding before heating this. I'm going to add the cream and the vanilla extract later, but I am putting a cinnamon stick in this while it is heating, and also it's going to stay in there overnight. So stir that up so everything gets all mixed together and get it on the stove on like a medium high heat. I've been using a higher heat than I used to recently, just to make it go faster and because it works. And you just want to keep stirring it the whole time because of those eggs. You don't want the eggs to scramble. There's ways to temper your eggs that supposedly make it so that they are less likely to scramble, but I think this works well enough. I've used this to make like custards for like an eclair pie, and just I've seen other people do it this way. But if you want to do it the other way, feel free to do that, and I guess look that up if you want to. You basically heat up everything besides the eggs and then add a little bit of the heated mixture to the eggs and stir them together so that they come up to temperature, and then add that mixture to the rest of the mixture. If you're doing it the way that I'm doing it, you might want to wait to add the cinnamon stick until after this is heated up. It'll just make it easier to stir, but it worked out for me. So I have to heat this up to 185 for my stabilizers. If you're just using the eggs, you just want to get to 175 or 180. And if you're using the xanthan gum and eggs, you also want to get to 175, 180. That's just for the eggs, You don't need to do that for xanthan gum, but you do for the eggs, and you have eggs in there. So do that. I'm sorry, guys, that sounded rude, but I just want you to know what temperatures you got to do. Sorry, but I'm there, and it should look like it thickened a little bit. It looks like I got some scrambled eggs in there, and that's fine. I'll strain that out. It looks like more today than it does the next morning when you see it in the strainer. So my guess is that some of that could be like stabilizer that has like gelatinized a bit, because sometimes I do see that, like after I heat it up, I see, like when I'm getting it out of the pan, there's some of it that's thicker than the rest of it. So I'm wondering if that's why it looks a little chunkier than the amount of eggs that get strained out of it later. But then I'm adding 405 grams of heavy whipping cream to cool the mixture down a bit, and then I'm gonna add all the alcohol-based ingredients so that they don't evaporate from the heat or anything, so that they don't lose any of their flavor. So then I'm using 18 grams of spiced rum. I'm using Kraken. 10 grams of bourbon. I'm using Woodford Reserve, and 7 grams of vanilla extract. Mine is homemade and it's Kraken based. Like I made it from Kraken rum, so that'll be good. But yours doesn't have to be. Some people might want to add more alcohol here to make it more alcohol-y, but don't do that because it will. Alcohol does not freeze, so it will make it softer and meltier, and it's already not the hardest ice cream. After that, I mixed it all together and covered it and put it in the fridge overnight. This is the same night after I cut up the toffee. I was able to get it small enough to be able to fit into my fridge, so I did that to let it, firm up more. So now I'm just cutting it up again and putting it into a container to put in the freezer so that it is nice and cold when I add it to the ice cream. The next day I'm straining the ice cream base to get any scrambled eggs out of there and the cinnamon stick out. After I strained it, I put it back in the fridge to churn later, but you could always just strain it right before churning. And this is the amount of eggs that I strained out, and there's also some of the seasonings in there too. That's all fine. The flavor's all in there, and there's enough egg in there as well, in the custard. Okay, so now it's time to churn. I got an orange out and a microplane out because I'm going to put some orange zest in there. I'm just going to put in a tiny bit, just like 2 to 3 swipes of the microplane, just to get a little bit in there. I'm going to add that towards the end of churning at the same time that I add the toffee. So that's pretty much everything. That's like the whole process. It's just churning it now, and then during the last 2 minutes, I added the toffee and the orange zest, like I just said. But I ended up using all of that toffee. You don't have to. You can use whatever amount you want, but I think it's a good amount. I think it's the appropriate amount. Then you just load it into your container and freeze it overnight, or for a few hours. I do overnight. This was a little bit more than a quart and a pint. So now it's time for a taste test. I already had some of this by the time I recorded this, and it was great. I loved it. You can see that some of the toffee got a little melty, but it's also still crunchy in there. That didn't happen as much with the last ice cream I made with this toffee, but I'm guessing that maybe the alcohol had something to do with that. Maybe the alcohol made things not freeze as much, so there was more liquid in there, which made it melt. But the good thing is that it just kind of melted into something toffee-like, it didn't become soggy, it melted, and I think that's good. But it is also still crunchy. This is it after I spent a few minutes taking pictures of it. The picture that you see might have two scoops in there, and I did do that and then put one back. But yeah, that's why it's a little melty now. And also, for some reason, my camera's focus started acting weird now. But yeah, like I said, I loved this ice cream. This was great. If you like eggnog, then try making this. And if you don't like eggnog, then I would maybe not make this. But you could try it. It's actually it's better than eggnog in my opinion. But do whatever you want to do. If you like this video and you're interested in other ice creams or some high altitude baking stuff or some food stuff, then subscribe or follow me on Instagram at Big Pee-licious Danger Kitchen with a bunch of ridiculous punctuation in the name. Bye bye now. See you later. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Eggnoggy dad. Everything. Everything like that.